J.D. Vance, vice president, Catholic convert. He's gone over just an incredible and inadvertent, almost really, story arc that we've seen here. The last world leader to meet with Pope Francis before he passes on. Then J.D. Vance coming, attending the inaugural mass for Pope Leo just a few weeks later, and then having this huge sit-down meeting with him and our Secretary of State, also Catholic, Marco Rubio. John, what do you make of all of this? And have you ever really seen the level of engagement between a president of the United States, his cabinet, and a pope, a pontiff, an American pontiff like this? It just presents an incredible new opportunity.
It's an opportunity. This is almost reminiscent of the 1980s when Ronald Reagan basically established a working relationship with the Vatican. It kind of existed in some way, shape, or form prior to Reagan's election, but it was during his 2 terms that, the evil empire speech was said, given, and then Trump or Reagan began that incredible relationship with St. John Paul II, which ultimately led to the downfall, as you said, of the Soviet Empire. Could we maybe be seeing something similar that happens with the Chinese Communist Party, that they might work together? That will be, time will tell. But I think that first meeting that, he made time for him right after the inaugural mass to meet in person. They, of course, exchanged greetings there in St. Peter's, and then they met the day afterwards. Bodes very, very well for what we could do as from this vantage point in this country with the Pope.
And that's something where, I remember, John Paul II was sort of my first pope, quote unquote, growing up. That was my vision of what a pope could be. And as a guy who is Polish, what he meant for the Polish people, and even today, what he means for the Polish people, when you go to Poland, you see statues of John Paul II everywhere. You see photographs, icons, you see everything's named John Paul II, this, John Paul II, that, and, streets and towns and children, it's just
Right.
everywhere. It's just literally everywhere. And so the idea was, it wasn't just that he was so great in terms of his faith, and it wasn't just that he was so great in terms of his charisma, which he did have in droves. It was the fact that he was able to go to his homeland, which was under communist occupation, occupied by a godless atheist regime emanating out of the Soviet Union, and be that force for good to break the shackles of godless communism and return the people to God. And now, of course, Pope Leo, he's American. He's not, he's not from China. But what's interesting? What's interesting, John, is perhaps we could use some of that in America. Perhaps we could use an America that returns to God. John, do you think that's something that we could actually use in America? Are we the ones that have actually been captured and taken over by a godless, atheist, secular regime?
They tried in many ways, and they almost did so in the last election. But, 40%, the largest Catholic landslide in U.S. election history. So we the people, we the Catholic people, we the faith-filled people, better said, rose up and understood what was at stake, and we fought back. So we pushed, a temporary win. I mean, the battle's just beginning, but I do see that. I see because when you start to lose something that you love, you pursue it with even greater fervor and zeal.
But John, I mean, I guess just to sort of elucidate what my point there. What I mean is, it's not just the government. It was every institution. And so many institutions, even down to the lower levels now. You see it in school boards. Obviously, we can't have prayer in churches, prayer in schools anymore. God has just been driven from the public square. And so when I think of John Paul II, that first mass that he gave in Poland, what was everyone chanting? They were saying, "We want God. We want God." And I look at the United States of America today, and I think that's what's missing. That's the biggest thing that everyone is yearning for, is crying out for, saying, we're missing meaning. We have all the information in the world through social media. We have connection. We have access to databases. We have AI. We have all, and as great as AI is, and as incredible, and it can search everything, it can't give you meaning. It can't provide meaning for you. And so everyone's trying to make sense. And I think that's why Gen Z, these Zoomers, they're saying, these institutions don't work for us. What does have meaning? And it's God. It's always been the sacred, the divine, and that's why they want the connection to source through traditional practices of Christianity that have always been, and really in many cases, unchanging since the days of the early church. That's what could you imagine if Pope Leo comes out to the United States and starts talking like that?
That would be phenomenal. And I agree with you, Jack, that our institutions have been infiltrated, right? Even the very structure of the United States, the Catholic Church, the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops, it became just in many ways an operating arm of the Biden administration, where it was cut. 50% of their funds were coming from federal grants, right? Which kind of just laser focused their minds on receiving those grants and then helping with the illegal invasion at the southern border. When you get that kind of distraction, monetary distraction, that's an infiltration of a system which is designed to be, like the founding fathers saw it, as indispensable support for America, our faith, the religion, the churches, right? So Pope Leo, could he have a role in freeing the church back up so that she can be just a voice in the public square again, like John Paul II? I think so.
And that'd be so incredible. Think about it, a John Paul II for America. And
he wore the John Paul II
really
vestment. You saw that on the inaugural mass? That's pretty cool. The JP2's like vestments that he wore as Pope.
Yeah, the vestment.
Pope Leo chose to wear that.
The staff as well.
Yeah, good point. That's right. Exactly, the staff.
And so he's clearly making these references, and he's making these symbolic references and these aesthetic references, which I love. But I still have to say though, and just as a guy who's look, it's my job to be skeptical. It's kind of what we do around here, and as someone who lived through the 12 tumultuous years of Pope Francis, we're still waiting to see. I like what I see so far, but I want to see some more confirmation of this. Like, just, okay, that's great. You said a prayer in Latin, and my children can do that, right? I want to see some actual brass tacks. Bishop Strickland, are you going to do right by Bishop Strickland? Is Father Pavone, who I saw that he is now petitioning to be reinstated to the priesthood, which is really just a guy who had a disagreement with his bishop. I mean, that was something so trivial. It should not have been. He never, by the way, never attacked Rome, never attacked Pope Francis. I thought they went way too hard, came down way too hard on Father Pavone, and just a number of things like that, John, as well as
church,
the
Jack?
practice of the
that's the
traditional
whole thing.
Latin Mass.
That whole concept, like, what's he going to do there? I mean, you're spot on. Like, we're cautious. We're not like canonizing the guy, but there are concrete things that need to be implemented right away. The synodal church idea, for those who are familiar with it, this is Pope Francis' idea of creating a church which is, yes, in dialogue with the common people, but it creates it's Hegelian in its idea that the truth is constantly changing, and we're never really going to know what we stand on as firm. He wanted a permanent synodal church where we're constantly reassessing foundational truths of our church, even Western civilization. So if how Pope Leo approaches that topic will be telling.